Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of The Awakening Self. My name is Aaron Fisher, and today we have another guest. Her name is Amy. Let me read to you a little bit about Amy. Amy is a speaker, coach, and facilitator. She supports women to navigate anxiety, depression, and stress using a spiritual mindset approach so that they can bring more light, joy, and ease into their lives. Her mission is to empower women to reconnect with their intuition so that they can live a soul-led, passionate, and fulfilling life. In her signature group program, Light Up Your Life, she supports women to come back into alignment with their soul, to live their life from a place of love instead of fear. So, without further ado, let's bring... Hello.
Hi,
Nice to see you.
nice to see you. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you perfectly.
All right.
Yes. So, thank you for sending that bio. The bio is great. It's always amazing to hear the things that people actually do. But what I'm always curious to know is what's the story behind it? What led you to get to this place in your life?
Yeah, I know I'm super interested in people's stories and their path too, because we are a culmination of all of our experiences, all of our challenges, and our childhood, family, cultural. So, yeah, I'd be happy to share and start with my story today. So, for most of my life, I grew up in a really supportive family. And I think oftentimes when you have a lot of support, there's also a desire for safety, like this desire to like not be outside of the box, to keep your kids safe. And for me, that actually had me put a lot of pressure on myself to want to live up to my parents' standards, to make them happy, etc. And so I grew up really wanting to please everyone else and had like my little rebellious times in high school, right? But for the most part, I didn't really ever connect to like what it is that I wanted and what it is that made me happy. And I didn't know that. I didn't know that I was doing that. And so I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and in fourth grade, where are you?
Toronto. Toronto.
You're in Toronto. Okay, awesome. Well, hello, hometown.
Hello.
Yeah, I grew up in Toronto, Canada, and I moved to San Diego with my family when I was 10 years old, and it was like in the middle of fourth grade. And that was really the first time where I had a big adjustment in my life, where I had a big shift in my life of needing to make new friends and being in a new school system. And that's where I believe a lot of my self-criticism came in. I felt like I was behind in school. I felt like I wasn't smart enough. I felt like I didn't fit in. There was a lot of more having to try harder.
Hmm.
And from there, a lot of self-criticism of, am I doing it right? Am I smart enough? Am I good enough? All of those things. So um, that was through high school. And so I went to college, I studied business entrepreneurship. And it's interesting to note that I did that because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I didn't know what I wanted to study. I am sure many people, when you go into college, 18 years or yeah, going in at 18 years old, they're like, you need to decide what you want to do with your life. And like, we don't really necessarily know what we want to do with our life, right? So I knew I was interested in health and fitness, but I didn't trust myself or feel like I knew enough to like do science or kind of dive into that. So I went business entrepreneurship. That's what my dad is. He's an entrepreneur. And um, when I graduated, there was something within me that knew I didn't want to do a 9 to 5 job.
Mm.
And throughout this whole process, I had also experienced a lot of my own health issues. So through high school and college, I had a lot of digestive issues. And I went to a lot of different doctors and just kept getting the answer that, that we don't see anything wrong, but here, take this. And I eventually got to the point where those things weren't working. And also, I knew that there was something deeper than that. I had an intuitive feeling that, like, it's not possible that I'm not feeling well and that there's nothing wrong. Like, it just didn't make sense. So I remember sitting in a specialist office and him handing me again another prescription. And I just was like, there's got to be a different way. Like
Mm.
this isn't healing. This isn't how it works. And I need to find the answers. So I went to a nutritionist, and that was my first time where I actually learned that foods, even if you're eating healthy foods, certain foods, if they don't agree with you, can actually be making you sick. And I
Mm-hmm.
was eating things like even just like egg whites and dark chocolate. Those were things that were actually creating inflammation in my system and making me sick. So I started to learn the power of nutrition, how to heal your body with food, and I became really passionate about wanting to share that with other people. So I became a nutritionist. I started working with women to help them with hormone balancing and digestive issues and autoimmune conditions. And as I was working with these women, I started to realize that there was a gap between them knowing what was healthy and actually being able to sustain the habit. So there was a mindset gap that was missing of actually being able to like stick with the habits that were serving them or not serving them. And yeah, that was a really big piece in the shift of like, oh, it's not just food. So that opened up the umbrella of eating psychology coaching, which is where I started to look at the mindset behind eating and how we as humans relate to food in a certain way and how we use food for emotional purposes and how stress impacts the way that we actually digest food and absorb food. So I would go on vacation and I would like have very little symptoms and I'm like, wait, what just happened? And started to realize that there was a huge stress component with food, right? So at the same time, I had graduated from college. I had started my nutrition business, and I also met a man who was from the same religion, same family orientation, and we ended up dating for a while and getting married. And I fell into, I guess, what you call like a white picket fence life of
Mm-hmm.
like a picture perfect. We bought a house together, kind of went through the process of what we're taught makes us happy. What we're taught is supposed to feel fulfilling and successful. And I had the finances, I was married, I was in a house, and I was just really miserable. There was something in my soul that was just like, this doesn't feel like I'm making enough of a difference, but also I just don't feel happy. So I had a lot of anxiety and depression, which led me to more of my spiritual journey. And it was challenging. It was about 2 years of being in the state of knowing that my life was out of alignment or getting to understand why I was feeling anxious, but not actually being able to take action because there was so much fear. It was fear that my family would reject me if I changed paths. It was fear that I would fail and not be successful and that I would never find anyone else that was actually a partner that I wanted to be with. It was fear that my business would fail or that I wouldn't have the same friends. And just fear was just really, really big for me. So I started to go to therapy and go to workshops and go to trainings and all these things. And I started to learn about the subconscious mind and how the thoughts that I was having were actually much deeper rooted thoughts that were creating these fear-based cycles. And I also started to learn more about spirituality. And I had never really had a connection spiritually that I knew of. I've always been really intuitive and very sensitive and emotional, and I didn't really know what that was. But growing up, I was more from like a traditional religious background and not necessarily spirituality. So
Mm-hmm.
I got to this rock bottom emotionally where I had gone to seminars, listened to all the podcasts, read all the books, but I wasn't taking action. And I was still in
Mm-hmm.
the same reality. It was like frustrating because I knew I was doing it now and I knew what was happening, but I wasn't actually making a change, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that frustration and that confusion and this deep-seated misalignment was what I was living with daily, and it was manifesting in health issues. It was manifesting in depression. It was manifesting in a lot of self-doubt, self-judgment, judgment of others. And I remember this one evening where I had been just going, I felt like I had done everything. And I was sitting in the bathtub because I was like, I just need some space. And I remember looking up and surrendering and just saying, please show me the way. Like, I know that I'm not alone in this. I know there's a bigger plan, but like, God, universe, whatever is there, like, please show me the way. Please show me signs. Like, I give up. Like, I can't do this on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And from that moment, it was the first time that I actually connected to source, to universe. And I just felt guided from that moment. I got signs, things started to happen that were like not happening in my life before. I started making new connections with people. I would run into people who had been like divorced and who like were remarried again, or I would open a book in a chapter in a book, and it would be a story of a woman who took a long time to make her choice of whether she was going to leave her marriage, and then she 2 years later met her soulmate. And it was just this like kept getting these signs. And eventually I got to the point where sorry, I got to the point where I got to decide, like, am I willing to risk it all? Am I
Mm.
willing to give everything up that I have with faith that I knew that there's something else available, that I know that there's another possibility out there, that I just believe that. I've never seen it before, in my life, but I see it in others, and I believe that it's possible. And my choice was, am I going to keep making everyone else happy, or am I going to allow myself to be happy? And that's what it came down to, was a choice of feeling worthy enough to take the risk, and take the risk of potentially losing everything that I had in order to create what I believed was possible for myself. So that's more of the awakening piece. And really just the veil had lifted, and I created this life that I had envisioned, that I had been manifesting, that I've been writing about, that I had been meditating on. And meditation was a big piece of this whole process of sitting and listening to my own truth instead of listening to what everyone else wanted for me, and allowing myself to hear it. Even though I knew it for a long time, I didn't allow myself to listen for a long time. And I now am really, really grateful that everything that I wrote down, living a block from the beach, and being in a spiritual partnership, and creating a business that I absolutely love what I'm doing, that I'm making a huge impact, that women are having life-changing transformational results, that financially I'm able to do what I love and support myself. Like, all of that started to come to fruition. And my favorite part was that I've attracted and connected with so many other incredible, inspiring women. And the women in my life, I feel like the support system that I have and the love that I have are relationships that I didn't know how to create those relationships before. And having those in my life has been like incredible. It's really, really supported me in continuing to elevate. So that's most of my story.
Well, I appreciate it. And I do see from like the posts and the things that you share that you have cultivated and created a very beautiful community around you, and it's very loving, very supporting. And I just like, I love to see it whenever you do a post, and you kind of show a little more of your world with other people. But what I want to actually ask you about, because it's such a common theme, is through your experience, through your personal experience and the people you've met in your life, why do you think it's so hard for people to break free of the idea of how it has to be? Like house, husband, job. Why is this such a difficult thing to break free from?
hmm Well, at the core, if we look evolutionarily, and if you look at like your ego is trying to keep you safe. And so we have a lot of fear of breaking out of the comfort zone, of breaking out of what we think is right. And the fear actually goes back very deep if we look at it. If we are not accepted by others, which is what we want to be liked, we want to be loved, we want to be accepted, especially by our parents. Like that's like when you're younger, if your parents don't accept you, then that means that you won't survive. Like you can't survive if you don't have love from your parents as a baby. And so this is like a very deeply rooted desire for safety, security. It's a desire for survival. And so what our mind does is that it creates this idea that if we don't do it the way that we're supposed to, then we're going to be rejected from society. We're going to be rejected from the people that we love. We're going to be rejected from our family, which means that we actually won't survive. Like it feels like we're going to die. And it's really scary. Fear gets in the way. So I think that's the main reason why it's hard to break out of the mold. And it's fear of judgment. It's fear of, there's also a worthiness conversation. Like, am I worthy of having it all? Right? Am I worthy of actually creating this amazing life? Can I actually do it? And
Hmm.
many people don't believe that they can. Yeah.
Well, I like your answer for that because I believe that a lot of individuals, as they're growing up, there's a belief that it needs to be a certain way. But you're speaking about all the aspects of, well, here are the fears, and maybe I can't, maybe I won't be able to, maybe I'm not that individual. It's just for somebody else. But yet at the same time, it's like the fear of changing versus the fear of staying the same. It's just like, well, which one is going to kind of break you down as an individual? And most people, as you hear through their talk, actually, all people that you hear from their talk is once they make that change of why not? Let me go into it. And then they kind of stand up into their fear and they realize it's not the fear of, no, I can't do it. It's the fear of the judgment of other people around them.
Hmm.
But also, what I want to ask you is, because you hear this word a lot, intuitive. Like how do you express or how do you explain what intuitive feelings is? Because when you said when you started to get these digestive issues, intuitively you felt there was something else. What does that mean?
Hmm. So intuition is can be described in a few different ways. It is a deep inner knowing. It can be felt in a lot of different ways, and different people feel it in different ways. So as I've gotten more sensitive to energy, I actually feel like chills on my body or sensations in my body. Intuition is confusing for people because it's not scientific. It's actually an art to learn how to listen to your inner voice. So we have two different voices going at all time. We have the voice of our soul, which is directing us to creating a life that we're living out our soul purpose and our soul mission. Then we have
Mm-hmm.
this other voice that like wants to keep us safe. It's like the human side of ourselves that wants to keep us safe and secure, and that everyone likes and accepts us. And oftentimes those don't align. More often than not, like those two things don't align. And the way that I describe intuition is that it has a different texture or a different feeling to it. It's a lot lighter. Your intuition is like, you can do it. Like, look, if you're passionate about something, like go ahead and do it. And if you want to move across the country, like go ahead and do it. But your ego is like, oh, but wait, if you do that, then you're not going to be successful. Or what if no one likes you? Or what if you have to leave everything behind and you're going to fail? So there's this battle between, and the ego is usually judgmental. It's usually louder. It's kind of like that annoying, loud voice that like is constant. The ego
Mm-hmm.
starts kind of soft. I'm sorry, the intuition starts kind of soft. It'll whisper like, hey, here's a new idea. And then when you don't listen to that idea, then it's like, hey, I thought I told you about that idea. And it will show you this in different ways. It'll poke you with like different challenges. Then your challenges will get greater. And eventually, if for a really long time people don't listen, it's chronic health issues, it's unexpected tragedies, it's all these things that are a reflection of like that the universe is like, wake up, you get to do your soul work and you haven't been listening.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's hard to determine the difference between those two voices at that point because your intuition is really intense and your ego is really intense. But really sitting with it and looking at, sometimes I have people write down the different voices that they're hearing and kind of differentiate them. Um, yeah, your intuition is just this like internal GPS of your soul that's guiding you to the direction of where what your soul is meant to do in this evolution of your lifetime is how I describe it. Yeah.
Cool, I appreciate that.
Yeah.
One of the other things that you hear a lot of individuals talk about, which can be very confusing, where people are like, just trust your gut.
Mhm.
Now, your gut is also, it has years and years of different feelings and different emotions and different different experiences that like you don't sometimes your gut might be telling you one thing, but actually you need to do something else.
Mhm.
Um, through your experience and what you've seen, how can somebody learn how to know more of what their gut or what's been programmed into them?
Mhm. Yeah, it's definitely an unlearning process and a relearning process, right? Like we have so much programming and patterning and all of that. Look, the truth is that you can't fail. Either you're going to do something and it works, or you're going to do something and you learn something from it and it takes you another direction. So what I have my clients do is start practicing your intuition with small things where there
Mm.
aren't huge risks. So even intuitively, what do I feel like eating today? What do I feel like eating right now? And maybe that makes you feel really energized and good, and maybe it doesn't. And you're just starting to pay attention to the subtleties, or using your intuition and listening. If you're out at a social event and you want to go home, your one mind might say, oh, you should stay because you don't want to miss out. But then like your intuition might be like, hey, getting some rest might feel really good for you. And then you have energy to be social the next day. Or I really love, when people ask you to do a favor, or when they invite you to something and automatically you're like, yeah, sure, I'll do it, because that's your autopilot. But it's like, do I really feel like doing that? Does that feel good to me? So yeah, your intuition isn't about being impulsive or being not like not honoring yourself or reactive. Just because it's a gut feeling, it is about tuning in and feeling, what does that feel like? And then from there, just knowing that you can't fail. You try something, and if it doesn't work, then you're like, oh, okay, yeah, last time I did that didn't work. Let me try it differently this time.
Yeah, I really do like that answer, because it's taken you years to get to this point, and it's going to take you years to get away from it, but you have to step by step and learn. And I like how you talked about the whole idea of autopilot. One of the things that I created, me and my friend, we created this idea because we're like, when there's things that are going on, like in coaching, there's an idea that's called wait, which is, why am I talking? So sometimes when you're trying to help people, you're like, I have the answer, but it's just like, but why? Why are you talking? Allow them to do it. What we came up with was an idea called to set the stage. And stage means stop, think, ask, gauge, and explore. So before you're willing to give an answer, stop, think about it, ask a question before you do, gauge the response, and then explore how that makes you feel before going into it. Is it easy? No, it takes time though, step by step.
Mm-hmm.
So when you were in the bathtub and you had this awakening moment, the one thing I like to ask, and I love to hear people share, is like, so when you had this awakening moment, after, like, it was as if the signs came, did everything just flow easily into your life and that was it and you had no more issues?
It's a great question. No, I think what my awakening and what is that I started to view life from a new lens, that I was supported, and that wasn't in this alone, and that there was a greater plan. And so even when the challenges came up, I had the foundation to come back to this trust and this belief and this understanding, that I'm not alone, and that there is a purpose for everything. So the challenges, even though that they were even greater challenges, that was the hardest decision I've ever made in my entire life. That wasn't just getting divorced. It was leaving an entire 5 years of my life, of a life that I created, grieving, not being able to connect with his family anymore, or with, yeah, there's just so many elements to it, of leaving an entire life behind. And so that wasn't easy. Yet even when I was crying, even when I was releasing emotions, it felt good, because I knew that I was honoring my truth. So I think there's a difference between when you're resisting your truth, and that feels challenging and hard in a lot of ways. But when you're honoring your truth, even when challenges come up, it's like, okay, yes, this is hard, and it feels so true, and it actually feels lighter for me. Even if there's emotion coming up, it doesn't feel like it's emotion because I'm in judgment on myself, or I'm not honoring myself. And I think there's a big difference there.
Very good. I like it. Well, a
Yeah,
lot of
there
times,
were lots of challenges, and I just became less afraid of the challenges. I had more faith, and my faith became greater than my fear. And that's really what I teach my clients, is that the more we cultivate a mindset, a belief system, turning your attention to what you actually desire to create in your life instead of what's actually in your life, but the more you build your faith, you're never going to get away from your fear. Your fear is never going to disappear, but it's how you relate to it and how you're building your faith. when your faith's greater than your fear, you can do anything. You believe that you can do anything. So, leading life from that place feels easier to me, even though there's still challenges.
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Having these awakening moments, the way that it's kind of seen on social media and books and stuff like that, it's just like, and then you have the moment, and then life is calm. It's just like, no, and then you get unplugged from whatever you want to call it, whether you call it the matrix or you start to question your whole reprogramming, and you're like, what the hell? And like, it's full on because like now you're like, as you said before, it's like, well, you've read the books and you're doing the programs and you weren't making the change, but you saw it and you're so much more aware of it now. It's just like, because once you see, you can't unsee, and it's there.
Hmm.
So then it's just like, okay, so now I'm in between this world. It's like, which one do I actually want to live in? And then you start moving forward with it.
Hmm.
But you've used the word fear a lot. My question here is fear a negative thing?
I mean, intellectually, and if I really look at, what fear is, I think that fear, I know from the spiritual sense, fear is like almost like a guide point. It's like showing you the direction to go. It's getting you out of your comfort zone. It creates the challenges. Um, is it a negative thing?
Or is
I
it a
don't,
positive thing? I just out of
yeah,
curiosity.
yeah. Um, I don't necessarily think it's a negative thing. I think that the way that you relate to fear determines whether it's positive or negative. So fear can either hold you back or it can tell you like, hey, you're uncomfortable, which means that you're growing. And if you see fear as an opportunity to grow, then it's a much different story. So I think your relationship to fear is probably determines whether it's positive or negative. Yeah.
For sure, I think fear is a beautiful thing in all respects because it's teaching you, one, where this is uncomfortable. Two, I believe that fear is because your body is programmed to help you to survive.
Mm,
And the second you do something new, it feels like, okay, well, one sec, whoa, no, no, now you're making us feel like we're not safe, but it's just going into new areas and trying. When I do my marathons or when I do my travel, like I get that and I'm just like, I just understand that I'm just really excited because I'm trying to do something else. So moving forward to it. Now, when
hmm.
you're going through a lot of these changes, there's a lot of thoughts, there's a lot of emotions. One of the questions, one of the books that many of the books that I read, it's like, you're not your thoughts, you're not your emotions. What is your explanation? How would you explain that? And do you agree
Hmm.
with it?
Yeah, I mean, I think you're a culmination of your thoughts and your emotions and your soul. I think that to say that they are irrelevant or that they're not part of you, I think it depends on how much you identify with your thoughts and emotions. And again, are you allowing yourself to process and move through them and redirect your thoughts in a way that's serving you. I mean, at the core, we are human and we're also spiritual. So the human part of us is our thoughts and emotions. Like we can't deny that that's actually like at the core. Of course, we're spiritual beings. We're light and love. We're souls, but we're also living in a human paradigm. So our thoughts and emotions do play a big role in how we navigate the world.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So when you're in your groups and you're dealing with, let's say, a lot of women that are talking about, well, this is my thoughts, this is my emotion, this is my feeling. Do you do you believe that they're speaking like that's their truth in the sense that like I am my thought, I am my emotion, I am my feeling, I am my truth. This is how my world is. This is well, actually, I'm kind of answering the question, but I mean, when people speak about their thoughts and emotions, like, um, do they truly like? How would I say it? A lot of times we think our thoughts or emotion are is us, and that we live through them instead of living with them. So when
Hmm.
you're speaking with women that are speaking about this stuff, how do you explain the difference?
Hmm. Well, a lot of the work that I do is guided meditation, visualizations, and most of the women, if not all of the women that I've worked with in the last year, have a daily practice. And what what meditation has done for me has helped me to separate myself from my thoughts and be the observer of my thoughts instead of be my thoughts, like we were
Mm.
talking about. So I think that there's a practice. It's not just like telling them that they're not their thoughts, but teaching them how to relate to their thoughts differently through various journaling prompts, to have some self-reflection, through definitely guided meditations. When you look at the scans of brains of monks who have been meditating, the brain waves of that are actually a lot slower compared to the average person who just has like a lot of stress and anxiety and lots of thoughts. I just remember my mind used to be so much louder and so much fuller because there was so much noise. But
Mm-hmm.
through meditation, I've actually, my thoughts have slowed down. I still have a lot of thoughts. I'm still very introspective, but not attaching on to them. I'm able to release them. So I think that the releasing your identity of your thoughts and of your emotions. I mean, I love The Seat of the Soul. I think it's called by Gary Chapman, or The Untethered Soul. There's a lot of
Antithesis,
books
yeah.
that Untethered Soul. Yeah, it's there's
Mm.
a lot of books that talk about like being the observer of your thoughts, and I think that's really powerful because then you don't have to guide your life based on your thoughts and emotions only, but you can actually listen and choose, is that true for me? Does that resonate? And am I going to show up emotionally and based on my emotions and all my relationships? Or am I going to take a look back and be like, okay, I feel sad right now. Let me take a look at that and choose how I want to show up.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, The Untethered Soul by, I think it's Mike Singer.
Hmm.
That was an interesting book that he wrote. But it's also, as you start going through these journeys, you realize that your thoughts and your emotions are just speaking about a present state that you're currently in, but it's not your future. It's like, here's an option. What do you
Hmm.
want to do about it? And instead of being like, no, 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 being like, okay, thank you. What can I learn from this? How can I grow from this? And how can I move forward? You speak about meditation being one of your tools. When did you get into meditation? How did you get into meditation? And why did you choose meditation?
Hmm. I did my yoga teacher training, um, I think I want to say 6 years ago, and I had done yoga in high school as well, but very sporadically, and then in college again. And I had tried meditation through those classes. I just had never had a consistent meditation practice. And my meditation practice actually came out of necessity. I was waking up with terrible anxiety at 4 a.m. in the morning, and everyone else was sleeping, my husband and my dog, and the house was quiet. And like, I just couldn't sit there with like all of these thoughts in my head and anxiety in my body. So I would go to the other room and sit on a meditation pillow and put a guided meditation on. And
Hmm.
at first, it was really uncomfortable. It was just like, okay, now I get to sit with all these thoughts. But eventually it became a place where I knew that I could have come home to myself every morning, and no matter what was going on in my life, that if I had my meditation practice, that I would have a safe space to go to reconnect with myself and my truth. So I've been meditating now for almost 3 years, and I would say maybe there's like, I don't know, 10 days a year that I don't meditate. Like, it's very rare. And that's because I know that it has completely transformed my relationship with my thoughts, how I react to my emotions, how I show up in my life. And starting my day with connection is really what allows me to show up with more love. Yeah.
I like it. Meditation. I've put meditation into my life. It's been over 5 years. I've done Vipassanas, and I've done a whole bunch
Mm-hmm.
of different forms of meditation to find out which form I kind of enjoy to do for myself. But it's kind of what you were speaking about, the monks, slow brainwaves versus an anxiety person with an anxiety, because it's fast brainwaves. And meditation is not about making it fast or slow, but being present without judgment and kind of watching things in the theater of your mind and just kind of being like, okay, well, if that's what's going on, I'm gonna have some popcorn, breathe in and out and let it go and be like, oh, that's an interesting film. And you're just like, okay. And then like the show finishes, you open your out, you're like, you open up your eyes and you take that breath and you're like, okay. And then you move on, and then the more you do it, the more you realize that like it's not you, and you're just picking something up. And there's certain things that deep down, like you said, in your subconscious or other parts that are making you feel a certain way. So it's like, now let's go into a little more. I believe that we're very much on surface. Like, that's my feeling, that's the answer, that's what I need to do. But it's just like, oh no. There's so much more digging and so many more things to go through. So meditation, you said, has been one of your tools. Do you have any other tools that you use as well?
Hmm. Yeah, one of my other favorite tools is scripting, which is basically future self journaling as if it's happening now. So envisioning what I want my life to look like 6 months or a year from now, and allowing myself to play in that. I never used to think that I was creative, and it was really hard for me to visualize things. And as I started to practice this of like, what do I want in my life? What do I want my life to look like in 6 months or a year? And start writing it as if it's happening now. The purpose of that is that your subconscious mind doesn't know if something's happening right now or if it's happening in the future. So if you
Mhm.
tell it that it's happening now and you paint the picture, then you feel that it's a lot closer. And the first time that I do this with my clients, I always do a visioning exercise with each of them individually, and we create their future because a lot of them don't even know what they want. So we do a guided meditation. They I support them in creating this vision and writing it as if it's happening now. And it's the first time where they actually feel like this soul recognition of, oh, that's possible for me.
Mm.
And the feeling that you get when you future self script as if it's happening now, it's just empowering, it's inspiring, it's the belief that it's possible, right? A lot of people use journaling to like journal out their ideas and journal out their feelings, which I still use it, and I think that that's a beautiful tool, and I know that that's something very therapeutic. And if you're just always writing about the things that aren't working, then that's what you're putting your attention on. So let's create time and space to focus on what you do want and feel it as if it's already happening, which is that's like the number one manifesting tool that I can teach is like you get to actually feel it in your body before it happens. And you can't just look at a vision board and be like, oh yeah, that looks great. But it's like, what would it feel like to be that person who's traveling around the world, or to have a certain amount of money, or to have a certain impact on other people? Like, how would you feel when that happens? And if you can get into that feeling, then that's a different vibrational frequency than the current vibrational frequency that you're at. So I
Mhm.
really love scripting. I do use affirmations. I don't use just generic affirmations that people can find online. I get really clear on what it is that they want, how they want to feel, what's something personally that they're working on right now, and then create something that elicits emotion from them that actually has them connect to the affirmation. Of course, you can still say like, I'm smart, I'm worthy, I'm fun, I'm successful. But if you don't feel super connected to that, then it would be different. So another one would be, or like, I love my body. If someone doesn't love their body, that's way too far away. So it's like, I'm learning to accept and respect my body, right? And that might
Mhm.
feel really resonant for a woman when she's working on body image stuff. So affirmations, meditations, scripting, those are some of my primary tools that I use.
I like that, especially the part that you spoke about for affirmations. It's like I've had body issues for a majority of my life, but for me being like
Mm.
I am perfect with my body, like no, that's a lie. Like that's me trying to fit into society's idea. It's like I'm not. I still have issues with my body, but I'm learning to love it each and every day. That is more of where I am with my affirmations and the things within my life. When it comes to scripting, you can talk about it spiritually, but you can also speak about it in a very
We're
yeah,
cutting
there
out
it
a little
goes.
bit. Okay, so I would love to hear. So you said that's more where you're at with your body.
Yep. So the next thing I was talking about was what you were talking about, future scripting, because it breaks into, so if you speak about it into a spiritual way, that's okay. Scientific way, there's also proof. Like all these interconnect because the idea of when you create a scenario in the future, your brain and they don't know. But what you're doing is you're opening up the neural pathways in your brain to reconnect, to refire, to create pathways that have been there, that have stopped firing, because now you're rewiring and this is happening. I fully agree with what you were saying when you were speaking about it, because it's true. It's like, what do you see yourself? Because you might be moving towards something that you don't see yourself in, and that's okay. But what do you see yourself in? Because maybe that's the direction that you need to be in. So the future scripting is phenomenal. I don't believe, so I learned about quantum worlds and all this other stuff. And there is no past, present, or future. And
Mm-hmm.
this is why I believe that you can speak to your past self that frees yourself in the present, that allows you to be whatever you choose to be in the future. But the second that we make and we put a box of limitations onto what we think we come and can become, then all of a sudden that we work in the little box. But when somebody says think outside the box, the better question or the better statement to say is there is no box. There has never been a box.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that you're putting a limitation of a box is now making you like, well, why can't I be like what? Like you? Oh, you can be like that because that is what you are.
Mm-hmm. My word for this year is limitless, and I
Hmm.
think that it's this idea that we are only the limitations that our mind creates for ourselves. So what if we removed the idea that you can't grow a certain business to in a certain amount of time or lose a certain amount of weight in a certain amount of time? Like attaching to time is part of the limitation that our mind puts very often.
Hmm. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
because we feel like, we must achieve this by a certain time. Well, I'm this age and I haven't achieved X, Y, and Z. It's just like, but that's not going to make you achieve it. And you're going to spend the next little bit of time talking about how much time you don't have as you're wasting your time. I've been there. I spent like a good 4 or 5 years of my life. I'm like, I'm not where I want to be in like for 5 years. And then I'm like, honestly, man, just like, you're not getting there. Why don't you just start? And then I started and I'm like, okay, thank you, 5 years of that self-talk, and it
Mm-hmm.
works. Because it's almost like you put yourself in this prison of limitation, a premise of, well, I should be because this is what's going on in society. And like some of the things that I talk about is like the saying that I have is C, so it's SEA, which has should, expect, and assume. So should is like everybody just should. And like this is not my thing. This I was at a girl's talk and she used the word and I thought it was great. She's like, people say the word should. It's like they should do this. They should have done that. Should, and they start shooting all over people. And I'm like, I've
That's
shit
a
on
good
a few
one.
people. And then there's this expectation of what you expect from others and what you expect from yourself, and then these hidden expectations that you don't speak about, and it causes problems. Like, well, I expected them to do something that I never told them to do, and now I'm upset because they didn't do it. How dare they? Instead of being very open, or, well, I assumed that you would just do that. Well, instead of assuming, let's ask. Instead of making assumptions, let's ask and have these kinds of dialogues, not just with other people, but with ourselves.
Mm,
Because the world is not a lonely place, but we need to go internally to understand that, which will help us better understand externally the world and the things that we're in.
mm. Yeah, the expectation thing I was thinking about this morning, and it's interesting how that if we were to just communicate what our needs were and share what it is that we desire or need from other people, most of the time they can meet us there. But that when we don't clearly communicate, which is most people too bold or too much or whatever it is, it's like, well, you're still energetically placing that expectation on the other person. If you were to just ask and share your needs, then they can make a choice whether they can honor that or whether it doesn't feel good to honor that. But I feel like there's a lot of gaps in communication because people don't like confrontation. People see confrontation as a bad thing, as something that's negative, that creates tension. Of course, it's uncomfortable. It's
Mm-hmm.
uncomfortable, and it's also like the most powerful form of conversation to actually address what's going on instead of sweep it under the rug and ignore it. And that was something that I really got to learn throughout the process. That was one of my learnings in my last relationship when I was married, was that I didn't actually share clearly what I want and need. And it was my responsibility also to share honestly, even if it might not be what the person wants to hear, because
Mm-hmm.
that's love. That is love, even though it might not feel like it in the moment. That's love, is being honest and not withholding. So I love this expectations and assumptions. And I think that it's a very big gap in relationships and communication in many ways.
I agree. And that's why it's so important to hold the space and, create this communication because
Mm-hmm.
the thing is, it's just like, it's not waiting until being in the state of an argument to have a conversation with people. It's about being in the state of calmness to speak about in case you go into those states of argument.
Mm-hmm.
It's having those ideas and the fact of communication is so powerful, communicating how you feel, because the more we share internally how we feel, the more it attracts the certain people we want in our lives, and the more that it puts us on a route to find even more of them and kind of separates us from other people. Because
Mm-hmm.
a lot of us, when we grow up, what happens? Like, well, they were my friends growing up. They've been my best friends. Like, it doesn't mean that you can't not love them. It just means sometimes you need to love yourself even more and just move and learn and grow and kind of let go. So the next thing, especially because you had your marriage and then you left your marriage. The idea of, like, how would I say this? You went through a lot of struggles, especially as you were saying about the marriage and going your own path and then going the spiritual way and going down this other path. Why did you feel that this huge change would be so difficult for you?
Before, I didn't have the self-love and the worthiness to really trust myself and to have the confidence to be able to make it happen.
Hmm.
I think that I felt it was so difficult because it was an unknown. It wasn't just carved out for me. It wasn't just a path that I was supposed to follow. It was like, okay, well, I'm not doing that anymore. So what does this look like? I get to create it, which is very exciting. And there's also a lot of fear in that of, like, what does that look like? And, you know, um, it didn't look exactly how I thought it would look at first. And I kept learning how to lean into that, really.
Hmm.
Did that answer your question?
Yeah, for sure. It is the unknown of, but I've known myself to be like this my whole life. Well, what happens when I go into another part of myself? I don't,
Hmm.
it's a fear. It's leaning into, sometimes people call it leaning into your future, leaning into your power, leaning into the unknown, whatever it is. But yeah, I definitely agree. So
Hmm.
we have only X amount of minutes left. So here's a question. If somebody was in a similar situation like you, what advice would you give them?
Hmm. I think one of the things that when I was there that I kept trying to do is I would keep asking for other people's opinion and keep asking, going to therapy, and those things were helpful. At the end of the day, it came down to me connecting with myself.
Hmm.
And I think that that is where I know that that's where all the answers are. So what I would say is that you do have the answers within you, and the journey is to cultivating and developing a trust within yourself, starting with small things and building that trust with yourself, and being consistent with your practices. You can't just read a book and not do the exercises in the book. You can't just listen to a podcast and not implement that information. Like, that just doesn't work.
Hmm.
It's surface level. You're understanding it intellectually, but you're not embodying the work. So my invitation is to embody the work instead of trying to do everything. Pick something that feels good to you. If it's breath work, if it's meditation, if it's spending time in nature every day, if it's journaling, whatever feels good to you. It doesn't have to look like my practices. Pick something that feels good and show up consistently to it and build trust with yourself and integrity. I used to have like a lot of, I would say I would do something and then I wouldn't do it and then I would feel bad about it. And I would just say start small. If it's 5 minutes a day, start there. Show up for yourself every day, prove that you can do that, and then it's going to feel good. So you're likely going to want to do more of it.
Beautiful. Yeah, it is about starting small, step by step by step. Like, I run marathons and I do ultras, but I started with like 50 meters. I physically couldn't run more than 50 meters.
Mm,
But through time, it takes it. And, you know, even if you think about it, you as a child, as a baby, like we started small. We got up, we fell, but eventually we learned to crawl and we learned to walk. It takes time. It takes patience, and it takes being surrounded by great individuals. But that, as you grow up, looks different and feels different. It all depends on you as a person. So my last question before we go is, if you could speak to your younger self, what would you tell them?
mm. I would tell her that she is enough and that she's lovable. And I would tell her that she's capable of far more than she thinks that she's able to do. Hmm. Yeah.
Beautiful.
Hmm.
So before we go, I just want to acknowledge you and all the amazing things that you do, the amazing work that you do, the work you do for yourself, the work you do for women, the fact that, you've used your situation in life as a way to help to empower other people around you, empower yourself, and really make a difference in this world. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you for this space to be able to share. And I appreciate your incredible questions and your curiosity. And you just showed up with so much love today. So thank you.
So before we go, where can people find you?
Mm. I'm here on Instagram at Amy Natalie Co. I also have a new website that is launching beginning of February, which is also Amy Natalie Co. And I have my podcast, which is called the Feminine Frequency Podcast, which will be beginning in February as well. So lots of stuff coming up. But for right now, if you follow me here on Instagram, you'll definitely get all the updates. And I will be sharing a free meditation bundle as soon as the website's up. So you'll get a chance to get some free guided meditations on there.
Beautiful. So I will make sure to put all that information into the description for this. And once again, thank you so much for your time and everything. And we'll do this again.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Bye.